Welcome to another free Australian Water School webinar. And today we're going to be talking about real-time flood forecasting with four of the best in the business. Ben, Marnaz, Katrina, and Chris, you can see on screen there. My name's Trevor Pillar. I'll be chairing. And we're well over 170 free webinars now. So it is incredible amount of material on the web to go through. Look at that. Thank you for joining us, everyone. On the screen now, well over 850 registrants from over 50 countries. Well, it's a great spread. Thank you, everybody. And come on screen, Ben, Marnaz, Chris, Katrina, if you're there, that's great. Wonderful to see you. Thank you very much for joining us today. And well, thank you for presenting this today. We are really honoured to have you with us. A quick go round. Real quick, one sentence, make it hard for everybody now. Ben, Chris, Katrina, Marnaz, what gets you up in the morning? What's your big vision for what you're doing in modelling and flood forecasting? You take off, Ben.
Okay, it's probably hard to define in one sentence, but there's probably three things, Trevor. One is just exploring new and better ways to do things. Other is connecting with people from across the world and different languages, cultures, etc. And then finally, just knowing that I'm making a positive change and positive difference to the world.
They're three big ones. Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Well, I think Ben's covered that for everyone. No. Look, I really do enjoy the technical challenge and very much knowing that I'm making a positive difference in the world as well.
Yeah. Yourself, Marnaz?
I love as they both covered already. So I love the technical challenge as well, and I always love mathematics and physics, which are all both involved.
Yeah, super
which
crucial.
doesn't happen really a lot. So, and I also love helping people.
Yeah, that's great. And Katrina?
I guess for me, it's doing something positive for the environment and trying to make sure that we plan and grow in a manner which it looks after the environment as well.
Incredibly important, exploring and doing things for the environment. And anyway, I'm going to go on. We'll hand right over to you, Ben, and then across to Marnaz. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trevor, and hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to talk about the Bagmati Adwara River Basin flood forecasting system, which we delivered in 2018, so 5 years ago. It was a World Bank funded project and administered through the state government of Bihar in North India. And this is a prime example of following on from my introduction of why I get up in the morning, because this was a fantastic project. We worked with fantastic people in a fantastic region, and it really sort of showed what we can do with the technology which we have available. I believe there's a bit of a delay in the slides updating, so I'll just take a second. The project location, for those unfamiliar with the Indian region, the catchment is the Bagmati Adwara River Basin. It flows out of the Kathmandu Valley in the Himalayas in Nepal. Half of the catchment is in Nepal, the upper half, and then the lower half is within India. Very flat floodplains, very sort of wide and large sort of fertile plains. The Bagmati River flows into the Kosi River, which is itself a tributary of the Ganges or the Ganga River. It's got a catchment area of nearly 15,000 square kilometers. So a reasonably large catchment driven by monsoonal floods. The objectives of the study, there were many, but if we boil it down into sort of the two most pertinent, were forecasting floods for the next 3 days at any location along the main reaches of the Bagmati and Adwara rivers. And the second was the more complex and challenging for us, which we embraced, which was allowing an embankment breach scenario to be modeled and mapped at any location on any embankment throughout the system. There's a picture in the background from a drone footage which I took of one of the embankments. That's not the main Bagmati River, that's just a small side channel. The main Bagmati River is several kilometers across to the left of the screen. But that embankment is representative of about 1,000 kilometers of embankments throughout the Indian portion of the Bagmati Adwara Basin. In some places, they are up to 8 or 10 meters tall, these embankments. And in most flood season, they will breach at one location or another, not generally due to overtopping, but due to erosion and scour of the base of the embankments. And when the breaches occur, as we could expect from the photograph on the screen, there's widespread inundation of the towns and villages. There were multiple challenges to the project. Some of the key challenges I've noted, which are more than half of the catchment is located in Nepal. There's a very sparse network of rain gauges within that Nepalese part of the catchment. So very limited information for use in the forecast models or use for verification of satellite rainfall observations. And there's only one river gauge in Nepal at the time, so very limited opportunity for calibration. And a very large variability of rainfall across the catchment, as we would expect from a monsoonal area, particularly in the foothills of the Himalayas. And somewhat some issues associated with data and data quality from across the catchment, which we had to address. We commenced the project with a market appraisal of different software that could be used to meet the objectives. And following that market appraisal and discussion with the state government department, we settled on a framework where Delft Fuse flood forecasting framework was at the heart of the system, with the Unified River Basin Simulator software from Australia as the hydrologic engine to convert the rainfall to runoff. We had a series of Python scripts which we developed in-house for downloading and accessing rainfall estimates and rainfall forecasts, and making modifications to the hydraulic model files, as I'll discuss later in the presentation. And finally, we settled on TwoFlow for the hydraulics. So TwoFlow is used for the 1D hydraulics for forecasting, as well as the two-dimensional hydraulics for inundation mapping of the breach scenarios. Inputs data for the system. We had data from a variety of sources, Indian Meteorological Department, Central Water Commission and other national agencies, state departments, forecasts and products and rainfall estimates from international sources such as NASA, JAXA, NOAA and UCAR, and then data from the Nepalese Department of Hydrology and Meteorology, which had to be taken from their website. The gridded rainfall products were estimates from the GPM system, updated every 30 minutes, and gridded rainfall forecasts from the Indian Meteorological Department and the Global Forecasting System, updated every 12 hours. The processing of rainfall took a typical workflow in the Delft Fuse system, whereby the point rainfall data is loaded in, is checked for gaps and data spikes, and then any missing gauges are removed from that data set, is gridded, and then sub-catchment average rainfall is calculated from the grids for direct use in the hydrologic models. We developed some bias correction modules within Delft Fuse. They allowed us to address the differences between the rainfall estimates, satellite rainfall estimates, and the observed rainfall at the ground gauges. And it also allowed us to compare the forecast rainfall to the gauges, albeit in hindcast mode. So that the Bagmati Fuse was configured for operational bias assessment. So any bias which had been assessed could then be applied for ongoing use. And the bias correction could be applied to the rainfall estimates and the rainfall forecasts. To develop the rainfall pattern for forecast modeling required combining the observed rainfall in the past period up until the current time, and combining that with a forecast product. and the system provided the opportunity to mix and match different products and factor those products with the bias as needed. Water level data was input to the system and subject to gap filling and converting levels to flows using rating curves where they were available. On the matter of rating curves, that was another challenge to the project. There's 4 aerial photograph scenes shown of one of the gauge sites where you can see over the time the course of the river changes quite dramatically within the defined embankments. So the reliability of rating curves is problematic, and they do shift from one year to the next. The modeling sequence was following a typical modeling sequence, starting with hydrologic modeling for conversion of rainfall to runoff, then forecast modeling using a fast one-dimensional two-flow model, and then the inundation modeling using a two-flow 2D model for any embankment breach scenario. And the sequence was defined by the forecast tree within the DeltaFuse software, so the user could step through each of the individual workflows in a sequential manner, just working through the process. The hydrologic modeling is very simplistic, but robust. So using the catchment areas, using SRTM, DEM for catchment boundaries, and slopes and lengths, and that takes the rainfall from those areas and converts it to a runoff hydrograph. Limited rain gauge data in Nepal meant we had a challenge in accurately representing the flow of water and the volume of water across the boundary, international boundary from Nepal into India. So we opted for an approach where we had 7 variations in rainfall depth from the Bagmati River and 7 variations in rainfall depth from the Adwara River, giving us a matrix of 49 inflow scenarios to the Indian portion of the catchment. And we have 1 river gauge at the on the main Bagmati River as it enters India for model calibration. The hydraulic modeling then took those 49 scenarios and modeled each and every one of them in an ensemble before comparing each of those results at the river gauges to the river gauge observations within the Indian portion of the catchment. We had to develop a hot start modeling process for the forecasting, as the annual floods are driven by the monsoonal rainfall and develop over several weeks, and can be water levels can remain high for a couple of months. So we needed to start the model not at the start of the monsoon period every time we simulated. So we used 2 flow restart files as initial conditions for the next day's simulation. So each simulation which we're running would then generate the restart files using forecasted water levels, which then we could also adjust using recorded water levels to then inform the hot start for the next day's simulation. And that allowed us to actively track the volume of water within the river system. The hydraulic modeling for the forecasting, these times a little bit out now, given this was 5 years ago, but at that time it took approximately 90 seconds to run a single forecast and approximately 40 minutes to run the complete 49-member ensemble. Now I'd expect those times to be, I would expect in the order of a quarter of that now, so much faster now. And each of the results were checked against the 19 river gauges using a Nash-Sutcliffe performance indicator. For that, we developed a performance module within the DeltaFuse interface. Now this matrix here shows in the columns the 19 different river gauges, and each of the rows represent the 49 matrix of variations in Bagmati catchment rainfall and Adwara catchment rainfall. And by selecting a line with the most favorable results, or the closest to the blue, green, and yellow coloring, we can select the combination of rainfall from the Nepalese portion of the catchment, which gives us our best representation of the volume of water within the Indian portion of the catchment. So for the scenario shown on the screen, that's representative of using the Bagmati rainfall as it's recorded with no scaling, but scaling up the Adwara rainfall gauges by 60%. The hydraulic modeling for the inundation mapping was a particularly interesting portion of the project, where we had to develop the models to be able to simulate an embankment breach at any location, and an unknown location. We developed the models to run in a historical mode or as a breach scenario. For the breach scenario, we developed 4 different model regions based on the 4 primary embankment areas, and it allowed the user to enter an upstream, downstream chainage of an embankment breach, whether that was a breach which was occurring or was forecasted to occur based on observations from the district engineer. And they could enter the upstream and downstream chainage of the breach, and then specifics around the timing of the breach, when it was expected to occur, how long the breach would be expected to develop over, and then any other information. And then by pressing start on the workflow, the Delft Fuse initiated some Python scripts to develop or prepare the two-flow modeling input files for that breach scenario using variable geometry, applying a boundary condition at that location to the model, and some plot output locations so we can track the water level and the flow of water from the breach. This is a picture of a breach which I visited in 2018. It was being repaired at the time, following a breach the previous year. So the Python scripts generates those files and then initiates the running of the two-flow model with the boundary conditions from the inside of the embankment used from either the gauges, if they were close, or the forecast model results from the 1D modeling. Then the results from the two-flow model then imported back into Delft Fuse for visualization in their interface using NetCDF files. And finally, there's a few slides here just showing an example of the breach which occurred on the 14th of August 2017 and progressed over the following couple of days to inundate this entire area. And the arrow there shows the location where that drone photo was taken from. So to conclude my presentation, we met the project objectives very well. We delivered a modeling framework and associated training to the clients so they could continue to develop and calibrate the models using new and verified data as it became available. The NetCDF functionality was built into TwoFlow as part of the project, and that's now available to all TwoFlow users. And the project's really demonstrated the flexibility and the power of combining TwoFlow, Python, Delft Fuse for operational forecasting and inundation mapping, and shown that operational hydraulic modeling can really be undertaken now, and it is compatible with the timeframes, and simulation timeframes are compatible with operational use. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and I'll now hand across to Manoj for her presentation. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, all good. Hi, everyone. I'm Manoj. I'm presenting a decision support tool for flood emergency purposes that was developed by City of Gold Coast engineers in Natural Hazard team with cooperation of Cloud team. The tool is called FEDS, which stands for Flood Emergency Decision Support System. Let's start with a short history. The special and temporal variability of riverine flooding have always been a significant challenge for engineers and decision makers during major flood events. In 2013 and 2014, City of Gold Coast Natural Hazard team challenged the idea of infeasibility of understanding complex flood simulation in the short time available during a flood. They developed a real-time modeling flood emergency decision support system, which was introduced by the advancement of the use of graphic processing units (GPUs) in hydraulic modeling TUFLOW, and sophisticated web-based GIS systems that better present the results of the models. And after they developed this system, they won a few awards for it. In this first generation of PETs, all of the hydrodynamic model simulation were done using six modeling PCs from 2 to 6 GPUs to simulate 9 different catchments throughout Gold Coast area. Cell size, model extent, as well as definition of major culverts and bridges were chosen based on the technology available at the time, as well as trying to achieve 1 hour time simulation during the flood for the models, and also getting the post-processing results. The final post-processing results were uploaded to a web-based system automatically. The challenges of this first generation of PET system was limited number of GPUs on a physical machine. Model extents cover most of the Gold Coast area, not all of it. Local modeling PCs were possible point of failures, and there were limited access to previous run inputs and outputs. All bridges showed flooded into full output extent, and using GPU only at the time, the model were only 2D. So in 2021, after the introduction of HPC engine in TUFLOW, new set of TUFLOW models were developed for the city of Gold Coast, and which covered the whole Gold Coast area, included major pipes and culverts, and were calibrated for up to 3 major flood events when the data was available. With the advancement of the cloud technology, it was decided to move PET's new generation using these new models to the cloud. Some of the values moving the system to the cloud system were increased access to the latest and high-end graphical compute. It was accessible everywhere. All catchments could be delivered within 1 hour with a smaller resolution compared to the previous PET system. Decreased time taken to notify our disaster management unit, and interactive dashboard view that multiple users could have access. Additional post-processing steps were added to the system, including removing unflooded bridges from the final results and water level plots at the alert station, and capability of using previous run results output as initial condition for the next runs for long duration events. This slide represents the DevOps lifecycle, which was used by the cloud team in the city of Gold Coast to assist with delivering the features of PETs. The products around the outsides are the tools which cloud team used to help manage the lifecycle at each stage. For example, GitLab is used as the continuous integration and continuous development tool, and Azure is used to host the solution, which is deployed using Terraform and infrastructure as code. Jira and Confluence are used for all planning and documentation. So let's talk about the domain extent of our area of our study and the data that we receive and the software that we are using. City of Gold Coast, which the boundary is shown in red, is located at southeast of Australia. Hydrologically, it is divided to 9 main catchments, which varies from 1,200 acreage to 378,000 acreage for our biggest one in Logan. Major rainfall data is received from more than 120 rainfall stations, as well as water level data for about 60 alert stations, which are distributed all over the hydrological model boundary and a bit beyond that. At the same time, we receive forecasted rainfall data from three different probabilities from Bureau of Methodology, radar rainfall data for the next 2 hours and 12 hours, which are more precise forecast data, and forecasted tide data from Bureau of Methodology in Australia. All these inputs are incorporated to produce input rainfall data using a specifically designed ERBS interface for City of Gold Coast for our 7 hydraulic catchment in TUFLOW, which boundaries are shown in this slide. How does the PET system work in normal condition? Every day at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. in normal condition, Bureau of Methodology released 7 days forecast data. Using a scheduled predefined codes using this data, we receive warning emails if the forecast data reaches certain threshold, which is currently 1 in 5 AEP. This includes the probability of forecast that the analysis was based on, which is 10%, 25%, and 50%. Accumulated rain and 3-hourly animation of rainfall distribution in KMZ format, as well as the result of IFT analysis for the next 7 days forecast, catchment-based and suburb-based, is provided as attachment in this email for all of the stakeholders involved. If the forecast hit the threshold defined, the solution will automatically initiate cloud-based hydrodynamic modeling with TwoFlow for the relative catchments which hit that threshold, using the result of hydrological model errors with default parameters which was set based on previously calibrated models for the forecasted data, and the users will be notified. As the event progresses, measured rainfall and river data become available. Based on automated code in place, users will receive notification if the recorded rain hit a predefined threshold. Similar to Forecast's alert station, this includes rainfall distribution map as well as IFT analysis of the recorded rainfall at alert station. At this stage, the user can use these measured data to calibrate the hydrological model approximately for the event using the critical values, initial loss, continuous loss, alpha and beta if required, for different alert stations that we have the rating curve for in ERBS. And then initiate a more accurate simulation based on the rainfall and river level sensors data throughout the city, plus the chosen forecasted data, 25%, 10%, or 50%. Next is initiating the TwoFlow runs on the cloud on the virtual machines. In the left, you can see the current interface of cloud runs on our environment PC, which receives all the data mentioned before. And in the right is the web-based interface of our cloud runs for TwoFlow, both of which are used to initiate hydrodynamic runs on our virtual machines. As you can see, there are a few variables that can be changed before initiating the TwoFlow runs on the cloud, such as model cell size, SGS size, simulation type of rain, blockage of the pipes, etc. The default values are set based on the model simulation and post-processing finalizing between 1 hour. For a typical rain scenarios over 24 hours. All finalized simulation information and results are stored in Azure-based storage, and the user can easily navigate through them and preview and analyze the results. As you can see, the user can see the summaries of the input and output of the model and information that was used for each simulation before looking to the details of the post-processing. This includes the average and maximum depth of the rain that was used for each model, and also, for example, the flooded roads and flooded properties that was calculated based on post-processing. This post-processing results uploaded on the web include animation of the flood extent over the time of simulation. So every person can put the address up there in the address search bar and see when the property, if it's getting flooded, when it's getting flooded. And it also has the maximum extent of flood duration of runs, flooded properties, and depth of water above topography at each property. Flooded roads based on the flooding of any point during in the length of the segment of the road, and also cutoff roads. Road inundation duration, which includes the water level time series at critical points along roads which were chosen based on DMU advice, is shown in the next slide. And the next post-processing result that we have is the new post-processing result, which is simulated versus measured water levels and information at alert station to check how the model is doing. Obviously, the example that I'm showing in this slide is for an event that was happened in 2017. So we all have had all the measured data for the whole duration. During an actual event, we will have only a measured data for part of the event. Okay. All of these results are downloadable, and any stakeholder can download the results and share it with the people who are interested, and also the decision makers. After a quick check of the results, the hydraulic engineer can decide if the result of the model is good enough to share it with our disaster management unit, and then they can send the alert email to our disaster management unit with the links to download the relevant models and access to have access to all of the results of the model as well as the post-processing results. So what's next? We have a lot to go still and in our next generation of FEDs, including moving our environment PC to cloud and adding more major flood events to the backup system so we can compare new flood events and adding minor, moderate, major levels to our alert station and etc. It was too quick.
No, it's fantastic. No, it's great. It's we'll go into a time of questions now. Thanks, Manaz. Thanks, Ben. It's great if you'd like to come on screen, Chris and Katrina. And I'll hand over to Chris and Katrina to moderate this next few minutes. We've still got 25 minutes before the end of the 1 hour webinar. So let's leap into it, shall we? It's great.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, everyone, for asking the questions. There were some great ones that came through. I'll start with a question for Ben. There were two questions in particular that were asking about the breach modeling. In particular, did the system do morphology modeling to identify the breach location and how that breach developed? Can you circle back and just explain how, I guess, the location of the breach and how those sort of things occurred?
Sure, Chris. Thank you very much. And good questions. Probably easy answer is no, they didn't consider the morphological modeling within the system, but there's no reason why they couldn't. So the system which we built was, the scope was fairly limited in terms of just using a defined location as to where, a user-defined location as to where that breach would occur. So it would be reliant upon the district engineer or the team out in the field to identify a location where either a breach was expected to occur or a likely scenario, or even a breach which had already commenced. And through they know the locations and the changes along those embankments. So the user would then, or the district engineer would phone through to the department to say, okay, we're expecting a breach between kilometer 412.5 to whatever. And then that would, in the system, we would basically take variable geometry to flow and progressively scour that embankment and change the geometry of the embankments just using user-defined conditions. There is no reason why a more advanced geomorphological modeling system couldn't be used and incorporated within the system as well to try and predict those breaches and do a better job with managing that breach and how it develops.
Thanks, Ben. I'll pass over to you, Katrina, for the next question.
Thanks, Chris. We'll start with one for Manus, and actually I'll combine two questions for you here. What are the challenges identified in the FEDS2 system, and what steps should be taken to enhance the system further? And more specifically, someone has asked, can you see any advantages in using a rain-on grid with TwoFlow moving forward?
Okay, well, I will probably one by one, Katrina. So I will start from the last one. We already have the option of running the model on rain-on grid. The main issue with that is applying all of the stormwater network in the system will decrease the speed of model simulation, and we want to get model results within 1 hour. And also, this system was developed for regional flooding, not overland flow flooding. So just having the major culverts and stormwater network was enough for our purpose. It's definitely as the speed of the GPUs increased, and I think with the new TwoFlow engine, we can use multiple GPUs for running 1D modeling. So we can start testing, applying more stormwater network to the system and see if we can run rain-on grid and apply those all of those pipes and culverts. So what was the next one?
just about some further enhancements. I know you had a slide there right at the end. I don't know if you wanted to just expand on some of those that are already under
there are
consideration.
a lot of things that we want to do. One of which is our main concern now, because now everything is running on cloud except an environment PC, which is receiving all of this information. So then we already created an environment PC on cloud, but we are waiting for, because the environment software is provided by Bureau of Methodology. So we are waiting for Bureau of Methodology if they can help us install the software on the cloud-based virtual machine. So then it would be all cloud-based, and it's a safer option. So the other things that we are going to improve is using Quad3, because currently our models are constant cell size. In the next generation, we are going to use Quad3 because we have a lot of urban area, rural. We have a lot of rural area. We can probably use bigger cell size using Quad3 model using TwoFlow. What else we are going to use? There are a lot of things I can mention. Hazard maps, which can be very useful for our decision support decision makers in disaster management units, and easier for them to understand because it's a combination of velocity and depth. So and then they can decide which area is mostly at risk, and the list goes on. What else, Katrina? There was another one, I think.
I know that covers those ones. I think I'll hand back to Chris to give one to Ben.
Okay. Ben, there's been a few questions that have asked about the ground truthing of the model. Can you add any commentary in terms of the validation of the model simulation results? Was it compared against real-time data in the 1D, but then also in the 2D?
Yes. So the 1D model was generally compared against the river gauge network. And south of the India-Nepal border, going down to the downstream end of the model, there's 19 river gauges throughout the catchment. So, and quite spread or well-distributed river gauges. So they provided a very good opportunity for calibration of the 1D hydraulic model within the embankment. There obviously were some data issues with some of them, and some datum issues which needed to be resolved, but generally that provided a very good opportunity for calibration of the 1D model. Moving across to the 2D model is a very different story, and there's very limited information out on the floodplain. Very large areas which are inundated on an annual basis when the breaches occur and when the monsoonal rains floods occur. To the extent there's hundreds of towns and villages which are just isolated across a very large area which is inundated. So tens of kilometers of floodplain completely inundated, and very little information to go on for calibration. We were very lucky working with the clients, the Floods Improvement Support Center of Bihar. They had a GIS expert who was really passionate about flood management and the role he had in the flood center. And he spent a lot of time collecting satellite imagery. Satellite imagery obviously not being particularly great during the monsoon period due to cloud cover, but he spent a long time going through the satellite imagery to try and find gaps in the clouds to get photographs of the floods as they're actually occurring within the catchment. So we did, it's probably the only data set which we had for validation of the results on the 2D area is by comparison of the flood extents to the satellite imagery. But the models that are there and can be progressively ground truthed with on the ground data if that becomes available. And now that the department knows what they should be looking for and what kind of information they need, then it's an easier job for them to specifically request their district engineers and their district team to actually collect that specific data, whether that's photographs of of flooding within the villages, or up against monuments or something which you can then later identify what that flood level was, or collecting survey of peak flood levels, or videos or any other kind of hydrograph recording methods out in the floodplain. So I think with having a knowledge of what they need now, is it allows them to move forward with collecting better information for ground truthing.
Okay, one for Manus. Again, it's a two-parter, sorry. Does
One
FEDS
by one,
capture
please.
Does FEDS capture variability in rainfall forecasts? Historically, BOM Rainfields products provide a 10 ensemble members. And also, does GIS post-processing include analysis against building footprint data and inundation of floor levels, and reconciliation with actual road closure locations?
Okay, I will start from the first one.
Yep.
So as we talked with a few Bureau of Methodology staff in a workshop. They said they are moving toward releasing 10 ensembles, but the data that they are still providing for us is 10%, 25%, and 50% probability of happening. So we have the capability of using each of them. All of those IFD analysis that I mentioned, it's analyzing all of those probabilities and sending separate emails if they reach the threshold. And also the automated runs starts from the most significant, which is 10% chance of occurrence, and then goes through 25%, 50% is if they pass the threshold as well. So that's for the BOM question. For lower level of the properties, Katrina, what was the question?
Yeah, does post-processing include analysis against building footprints and inundation of floor levels, and then reconciliation against road closures as well?
Okay, so currently the code that we are using is using the centroid of the lot of each property, and it's using DTM at that location to compare it with the depth of inundation over that centroid. In the next generation, because we already have another code which uses building footprint, which will get the max in that building footprint. The only main challenge that we have is that floor level is not available, and so it's all based on compared to DTM. So if people know what's the floor level compared to DTM, probably they can work it out for now. But yeah, for our models, we need that data to compare it to the actual floor level. And you said something about road closure.
Yeah, do we actually reconcile against actual road closures?
Yes, so we have for road closures, as I said, in two of the post-processing, one of them is road closures. So we have a layer of segments of the road. So the one of the post-processing is analyzing if each segment of the road, if there is a point which is on the water, then it's just say, for example, it's on the water, and we have 4 different labels for critical, not critical. I mean, this step up to this step, and then the roads that are cut off because it's only connected to flooded roads will show as cut off. So, and also there's another layer which are critical points that normally gets flooded, which we got from our disaster management unit. So which they are interested to know what's the water level at each stage, and we are plotting the water level versus time for those critical points as well in the roads.
Thanks, Manus. Ben, I'll combine 2 questions here. I've just gone from the upvoted questions that as they're listed here. The top one is just simply asking what was the spatial resolution, cell size and run times for the 2D model. I imagine there's a very quick answer from you. Just to flesh it out a bit more and bring it back to forecasting a bit more, can you also comment on, when it came to running the system, if there was any systematic over or under prediction that you noticed with any data sets when it came to like the rainfall forecasts or even hindcasting data sets?
Thanks, Chris. The grid size, that was something I didn't talk about in the presentation. The 2D model had grid size of 50 meter by 50 meter grid cells. So that's a square grid. We did test different scenarios of using coarser grids or finer grids, but our target was to try and keep the 2D simulation times under 1 hour. So we found with using a 50 by 50 meter grid, produce the simulation results in around about 40 minutes, I recall it was. Now, on today's computers, today's software, and the advances in the computation, we'd expect that it's probably in the order of 10 to 15 minutes now. You'd probably be good on to translate yourself, Chris. Yes, so there are further features now, which I suspect a lot of the audience would be aware of within TwoFlow, where we can use, despite using a 50 meter grid, you can actually represent subgrid scale topography within each of those grids. So even if we selected a 50 meter grid, you can actually represent different features within that 50 meter grid cell, which traditionally that 50 meter grid cell would have just been a flat bed or flat area across the 50 meters to represent the storage of that cell and the conveyance from one cell to the next. But now we've got advanced features where we can actually model finer terrain within that area, as well as opportunities for using variable grid cells as well. So the quad tree feature in particular, if anyone's heard of that, refers to an opportunity, a feature in TwoFlow where you can have 50 meters in one area where there may be lesser interest, for example, a flat floodplain, but you then might want to represent it as a finer grid for an urban area, 10 or 5 meters or something similar. The second part of the question was relating to the prediction and the skill of the system. And we found that starting off with the rainfall, the rainfall, the TRMM rainfall, when we looked at the historical data sets for that, so the satellite rainfall from NASA, and the subsequent products, the GPM rainfall, providing the rainfall estimates grids, they were generally very poor. There was no systematic under or over prediction of that rainfall. And we did find through a literature review that was fairly consistent with other projects in the Himalayan region, that those satellite estimate products are generally pretty poor for representing rainfall within the Himalayan region, which was problematic for us because we didn't have any backup to that. We only had a couple of gauges throughout the Nepalese portion of the catchment. The forecasted products were generally pretty good. The GFS forecast was one which we used from for NOAA from the States, and then the Indian Meteorological Department forecast is actually a downscaled version of the GFS forecast itself. So they were fairly consistent in their performance and generally performed reasonably well, albeit we only had daily rainfall gauges to compare against. So far as the rest of the system goes, it was a very sort of, the project was in its infancy at that stage, and it really needed further monsoonal periods to collect the data to be able to build up an appreciation as to how well it would have performed over multiple seasons. We did certainly have some where it was very challenging to calibrate the models, given some of the data issues which we were faced with, and only having daily data at that time. And I understand the department at that time were in the process of installing a real-time data acquisition system. So it wasn't far off before they would have hourly or certainly sub-daily rainfall and river level data to calibrate to. So hopefully I sort of answered that. I don't think I necessarily answered it the way people wanted to hear.
I can see a thumbs up. So
I think we've probably covered a lot of the questions there for Manus, but there seems to be a lot more for Ben. So I don't know in the remaining time, Chris, if you wanted to do more for those for Ben.
No, definitely. I can throw a few more at him without too much effort at all. A few people have asked Ben about the two-flow fuse system. Is it much work to get that up and running? And from your experience, I know you've used this on multiple projects. Any lessons learned that you could share with the audience, just in regards to fuse and two-flow specifically?
That is, I know we always say it about questions, but that is a great question. It was actually fairly easy to do the integration. I think the hardest part was actually something which we only learned once we'd sort of got into it and started to work through it, and we only learned through hindsight, was the planning process. And you've obviously got limitations with the interface of Delft Fuse. You've got limitations of the interface with two-flow and inputs and outputs, and how those data sets are exchanged between one another. So there are Delft Fuses, both of those systems, Delft Fuse and two-flow, are big programs with a lot of variability, a lot of options, and there's different ways you could approach it. So we could potentially, you could find multiple ways of integrating two-flow within Fuse. We found that the best way was just to initiate some batch files from two-flow. So once Delft Fuse had created or initiated the Python scripts to develop the two-flow files which we needed for the embankment breach scenarios, then two-flow was just run through the standard batch files that two-flow is normally run through. So that enabled us to simulate ensembles through batch files as well. But then it's just managing the interface between the data which is produced, or the outputs from two-flow, and getting that back into Fuse. So the best piece of advice I could really give anyone that's going down this path is just to understand both systems and their capabilities and limitations from the offset. Sit down with a blank piece of paper and just start sketching how the data flow is going to work. So making sure that the data flow is going to move in the right direction, you've got the right formats, and everything is all compatible. Otherwise, you end up going down a path where you think it's all going to work, and you get to an endpoint or a specific point, and there's no way to go. You're backed into a corner, and you need to backtrack and redesign it. So design is the key element.
What about we do one more question, and then I can see the questions are just growing.
They're loading up.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah, it is good. Thank you.
Everybody. I think we can put that to the quality of the answers. The quality of the answers has been exceptional. So you both done a great job there.
Take another question.
One last question. Let's see. Ben, thanks for the presentation. Actually, this applies to both of you. For either project, was the hydrological model component automated, or do they require manual estimates of input parameters, for example, losses?
So Ben, you're going first?
I can just jump in first. Yeah, we use the URBS software, or the Unified River Basin Simulator software. It's the same software that's used nationally by the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia for their forecasting operations, and it's all automated within Delft Fuse. So automated so far as a user will select, will click on the workflow, and it will, Fuse will push out the data sets, run URBS, and then pull in all the data sets afterwards, the results from that simulation. But there are opportunities for interaction with the modeling parameters. Manoj, did you have anything to add to that?
For our system, for the first runs, which we didn't have any rain yet, the model will run in default using the default variables, which were calibrated for the previous events. And then after we get some rain, we will play around with initial loss, continuous loss, and alpha and beta to match the water levels at the alert station that we have rating curves for, and as a result, water level for, so we can compare water levels measured versus modeled in hydrology, so we can create the best input for our two-flow models.
Well, thank you, everybody. This has been an absolutely stunning hour. and Ben, Inez, Chris, Katrina, just huge amount of experience going in here. I know we could talk this through for another year, probably, who knows? But I appreciate your time and effort here, and for everyone joining us there today. Before we end, there's just a few thoughts we want to share, Chris, around the 2024 webinars coming up, and these topics are so critical.
On behalf of Tuflo, we really just want to thank the Australian Water School for hosting these events for us. That really do a great job behind the scenes to make it run seamlessly. Today's webinar represents the final event for this year from Tuflo. And in light of that, we've actually just published all of our upcoming events for 2024. And I just wanted to bring your attention to what those events are. To start with, we'll be kicking off 2024 with Flood Modelling 101. This will be a course that I'll be running. I'll be walking people through just the general steps and concepts that I do when I do my flood modelling to hopefully build an accurate model first time round. The event will take 3 weeks to run, so there'll be one session over 3 consecutive weeks, and that starts in March of next year. There's a link at the bottom of the slide there if you'd like to register. Now, in addition to the training, there's also 6 different webinars that we've scheduled throughout the year. I'll very quickly just walk you through these. We have how to benchmark your hydraulic software. It's going to teach you the basics on how to benchmark a solver and how to validate a solver to test its robustness. We have water quality model validation using mass balance analysis. This webinar very much focused on the concept of using constituent flux information to improve your model calibration performance. It's a more process-based approach than just focusing on concentration. So it's a methodology I recommend you listen into, because it'll actually make your modeling a lot easier to get right when it comes to calibrating models. So that'll be very useful. We then also have efficient model running with automation. Jaap and Greg will talk about some hidden factors that might be slowing your simulations down. We'll talk about some scripting to stage your simulations, and also how to select the best hardware for your modeling. And the last 3 for the year, I think the topics of these more or less speak for themselves. We have new methods to simulate runoff and pollutant dynamics in urban environments, using hydrodynamic models to inform nature-based solutions. That seems to be a very popular topic at the moment. And applications of groundwater modeling in Tuflo. So look, we really look forward to seeing you all next year, and I hope the rest of 2023 goes well for you.
Thanks, Chris. That is great. And those 6 webinars coming up for Tuflo are going to be huge. What a great session about an important topic like flood modelling. It's so critical. And look what's going on here. Australian Water School, take control of your learning. I think that's the punchline here. Webinars on the left, live courses in the middle, and on the right, on-demand courses. I won't go through them. Thank you once again to the presenters today, Chris, Marnaz, Ben, and Katrina. It's been huge. And in the background for Australian Water School, Joel and Renee. So good to have this team together to do this. Well, we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Have a great end of 2023 and a great start to 24 to everyone on board today. Thanks again for joining us. Bye for now.